Samarkand is one of the oldest cities in the world, a contemporary of Rome and the first Olympic Games of ancient Greece. In this episode, we'll find out why the domes of Samarkand are turquoise. According to an ancient Eastern legend, which guest will bring happiness to the home? There is still debate about the exact age of Samarkand. According to the latest archaeological data, the city was founded in the 8th century BC. At that time, however, it was called Marakanda and was the center of the ancient region of Sogdiana. In antiquity, the cities of Sogdiana were traversed by the famous Silk Road, and Marakanda, now known as Samarkand, was located at the main crossroads of caravan routes from India, Byzantium, China, Tibet, Iran, and Siberia. Some historians are convinced that Samarkand actually emerged as early as the 3rd millennium BC, but archaeologists are in no hurry to draw a final conclusion on this matter and continue to study the cultural layers of this ancient land, excavating the ancient settlement of Afrasiab. Samarkand was destroyed and rebuilt many times, but it truly flourished under Amir Timur, the great conqueror Tamerlane, who made the city the capital of his empire. All the most remarkable landmarks that we see today were established by his dynasty. But I will begin my aesthetic and historical tour with this modest mosque by Timurid standards, because it was founded much earlier than Gure Amir, Bibi Kanim, and Registan. At the beginning of the 8th century AD, on the site of a Zoroastrian temple, that is, back in the days of Sogdiana. The structure stands in the shadow of the famous azure domes, somewhat apart, silently observing the city from the side of the Tashkent road. The temple was razed to the ground by the Mongols in 1220, and its restoration only began 6 centuries later. In the earliest photograph from 1883, it already appears almost as it does today. To me, the mosque has a certain special aura. Without unnecessary pomp or grandeur, it is calm and blessed. By the way, this complex is a vivid example of folk architecture from the Samarkand school. The painted decoration of the columned Ivan is almost never repeated, and despite its brightness, it looks harmonious. The mosque is named after the preacher and legendary figure Khizr, the patron of travelers and a wise, kind old man who was considered the embodiment of immortality. Khizr appears only when there is a need for him. It is said that you can meet Khizr 3 times in your life, and he can come in any form. That is why in the East, where special respect for guests is already customary, it is believed that hospitality cannot be selective. In 2018, a mausoleum for the first president of the Republic of Uzbekistan, Islam Karimov, was opened on the territory of the mosque. At that time, Hazrat Khizr was already under the patronage of UNESCO, and it was very important to preserve its historical appearance. And now imagine, the year is 1890. We step out of Hazrat Khizr onto the Tashkent highway, now called Islam Karimov Street. We look down from the hill, and there are eerily massive ruins, completely out of proportion with the surrounding buildings. This is what the legendary Bibi Kanim Friday Mosque looked like at the end of the 19th century. In front of it, where the park is now, as we can see in this photo from 1883, there was a horse market. And in this photo, taken 10 years later in 1893, it's the same horse market near Bibi Kanim. Notice in the distance you can see a complex of domes. Doesn't it look familiar? Of course, that's another iconic monument that has survived to this day, the necropolis of Shah Izinda. And so we've moved on to another major historical theme, the legend of the living king. In fact, that's exactly what Shah Izinda means. So, who is this living king? His name is Qusam ibn Abbas, and he was none other than the cousin of the Prophet Muhammad. As a follower of the new religious teaching, he arrived in what was then Marakanda in the year 677 to spread Islam, but was killed by the pagan Sogdians. And according to popular legend, he is called the living king because after being killed, he did not die, but jumped into a deep well where he gained eternal life. But those familiar with Islamic tenets understand that he attained eternal life not by sitting in a well, but by suffering for his faith, essentially becoming the first Shahid, martyr. According to doctrine, the soul of a warrior who dies in the name of Allah immediately enters paradise and gains the right to eternal life. The supposed grave of Qusam ibn Abbas is located in the farthest mausoleum of the Shah Izinda complex. These are the very first existing photographs of the Shah Izinda necropolis, taken between 1868 and 1872. They were taken from the Turkestan album of Governor General Konstantin Petrovich von Kaufmann. And this unique publication deserves a story of its own. In short, it is a collection of 1,200 rare earliest photographs of Russian Turkestan intended to acquaint Russian and Western researchers with the history, ethnography, and culture of Central Asia. As you can see, 150 years ago, the memorial complex was surrounded by sand dunes. The buildings themselves have been fairly well preserved in their original form, and from this angle, the ruins of Bibi Khanum are clearly visible from the mausoleums. Still, the way we see the shakis in the complex today is the result of painstaking work by restorers over the years. The entire palette of blue and turquoise shades with touches of yellow, green and white. You could say this is an open-air museum of medieval decorative ceramic art, and of course wood carving as well. Some doors have been restored, but miraculously some of the originals have also survived. For example, like this door leading into the mausoleum of Qusam ibn Abbas itself. To visit the memorial complex with greater understanding, let's figure out whose mausoleums these are and to whom they belong. Spoiler, the most beautiful ones of course belong to Timur's sisters and wives. Some of them built their own mausoleums during their lifetimes. Let's begin. As you climb the stairs, which, by the way, symbolically consist of 40 steps, the first mausoleum with 2 domes will be on your left. It was built in the 1430s by Ulugbek for his companion, the scholar and astronomer Qazi Zadeh Rumi. He was born in Bursa in 1364 in the Ottoman Empire and worked with Ulugbek at his observatory in Samarkand, becoming a co-author of the Zij-e-Sultani, the famous star catalogue, still renowned today for its accuracy, containing the coordinates of 992 stars. We continue climbing up the steps and reach the middle part of the necropolis, which is also a favorite Instagram spot for tourists. As strange as it may sound for a cemetery, this narrow alley with its tall blue turquoise walls is essentially formed by 4 mausoleums built closely together. The first one on the left is the Amirzadeh mausoleum, which translates as son of Amir. But that's just a convention. Opposite it, the first one on the right is the Tuglu Tekin mausoleum, which belongs to the mother of Timur's associate, the commander Amir Hussein, who was later buried here as well. Both mausoleums are richly decorated with glazed terracotta, which has survived to this day in its original form. Take a look at these photos from the beginning of the last century. The next 2 mausoleums are the most popular among tourists. They have preserved not only their exterior, but also their lavish interior decoration, and both of them belong to Timur's sisters. On the left is the mausoleum of Turkan Ako, the sister of Amir Timur, who built this tomb for her deceased daughter Shadi Mulk Ako in 1372. However, in 1383, Turkan Ako herself was buried here, next to her daughter. Inside, this is one of the most richly decorated mausoleums. Complex geometric and floral patterns, predominantly in blue and turquoise tones. Hundreds of small stars merge into a single 8-pointed star above the vault. And the doors are richly decorated with carvings. Although most likely they are not original, the old photographs do not show them. The mausoleum of Turkan Aka and her daughter, Timur's niece, Shadi Mulk Aka. Judging by old pre-restoration photographs, this is the best preserved mausoleum. Opposite is the mausoleum of Timur's other sister, Shirin Beka Aka. According to the same series of pre-restoration photos, it is less well preserved. There are many gaps on the walls of the Iwan. Today, the decor of the tomb is bright and elegant. A panel made of hexagonal blue tiles has preserved traces of gold-painted flying herons among flowers. The upper part of the mausoleum is adorned with ganch painting in blue colors with gilding. Further down the corridor are nameless mausoleums and the so-called Okta Endar, an unusual octagonal crypt from the first half of the 15th century. Standing separately is the mausoleum of Usta Alina Safi, with a white monochrome arabesque on which a beehive has settled. Apparently he was a good person. The crypt is named after the master who built it in the 1360s, 1370s. The structure has been very well preserved. Inside, the decor is similar to that of the Turkan Ako mausoleum, and it is clear that the finishing is authentic. Thus we arrived at the upper mausoleums. It is here, according to legend, that the remains of the living king Qusam ibn Abbas rest. Opposite his supposed tomb stands a mosque and the mausoleum of Amir Timur's wife, Tuman Ako. These structures date back to 1404 to 1405. The portal of the mausoleum facing east is entirely covered with inlaid mosaics, but the interior is even more beautiful. The mausoleum's decor is bright and elegant with gilded ornamentation. Could all of this really have survived since the 15th century? Almost. This is the earliest photo of the interior that I found. It's unclear what happened to the gilding. The photo is black and white. But considering that in 1981 there had not yet been any large-scale restoration, it seems that the interior's decorative relief is authentic. The neighboring mausoleum to the right, dating from 1361, is nameless, but it is believed that it may have belonged to Kutlug Ako, one of Timur's wives. The Shah-i-Zinda necropolis made a powerful impression on me, primarily because of the concentration of ancient, well-preserved ceramic tiles. You find yourself in a vibrant open-air museum, and most of this carved glazed terracotta has been preserved in its original state. Of course, this is truly unique. And since we've come so close to the topic of Timurid architecture, let's move on to the personality of the legendary conqueror. This is roughly what Amir Timur looked like during his lifetime, and we know this today thanks to a unique method for reconstructing a person's appearance based on skeletal remains. The foundations of this method were developed by the archaeologist and anthropologist Mikhail Gerasimov. These are rare photographs of a group of scientists led by Gerasimov during the opening of Tamerlane's tomb in the Guri Amir Mausoleum in Samarkand in 1941. It was at that time that the remains were obtained for examination. However, this very scientific expedition also became the basis for a frightening story about Timur's curse. After all, the day after the sarcophagus was opened, Nazi Germany attacked the Soviet Union. Was this just a coincidence, or was it really something mystical? You can share your opinion in the comments. Amir Timur died during a military campaign in China. But this did not happen on the battlefield, but from illness. And the mausoleum that the commander had built for his beloved grandson Muhammad Sultan, as it turned out, became his own tomb. At the time of his death, Tamerlane was almost 69 years old, which was quite old for that era, and considering his intense military life. He outlived not only his 3 sons, but also some of his grandchildren. When visiting the Guremir Mausoleum, we enter what could be called the ceremonial part of the mausoleum, or the memorial hall. The marble tombstones are symbolic and indicate the approximate location of the graves, while the actual burials are in the lower crypt. By the way, this black jade slab was brought by Mirza Ulugbek from China for his grandfather Timur's grave 20 years after Timur's death. In the very first photographs taken in the 1880s and 1890s, you can see that the intricate original arabesques of the mausoleum have been preserved. In some places, the wall paintings have suffered damage. What we see today is the result of consistent work by restorers who have restored and transformed the former decor of the mausoleum. The paintings are done with gold leaf and imitate a starry sky. However, the architecture of the complex has suffered significantly over 4.5 centuries. For example, in the earliest photos of the entrance portal, also from Kaufmann's Turkestan album, you can see how well the ceramic decoration of the lower half of the facade has been preserved, while the upper part of the structure has completely collapsed. Restoration work was carried out continuously, little by little. So if you compare these photographs taken 40 years apart, you can see that in the second one from 1911, the portal is reinforced with brickwork. A lot of work has been done on the 15-meter dome over the years. The first color photo from 1911, taken by Sergei Prokudin-Gorsky, a pioneer of color photography in Russia, allows us to assess the condition of the ceramic cladding. The calligraphic ornaments on the drum beneath the dome have been preserved in perfect, pristine condition. However, the azure onion domes have borne the brunt of the elements for 5 centuries. It was only during the large-scale restoration at the end of the 1940s and the beginning of the 1950s that the blue cladding was fully restored to the dome. In these photographs from 1955, the dome is already completely covered with ceramic mosaic. So why do the domes and the terracotta decor of Timurid architecture feature blue and turquoise colors? There are symbolic and lyrical theories, as well as practical, craft-based explanations. Which one should we start with? Firstly, the color was chosen as a symbol of the sky, happiness, and purity, and secondly, because of its simple and accessible nature. To achieve blue and turquoise colors, it was enough to add cobalt in varying proportions. The Bibikani Mosque complex, named after Amir Timur's chief wife, has 3 domes, and they were less fortunate than the dome of the Gur Emir Mausoleum. The reason was haste and a tendency toward gigantism. The complex was built in a record 5 years for that era. In the earliest photographs, you can see that neither the domes nor even the walls of Bibi Kanim survived the forces of nature over half a millennium. It's no secret that Samarkand is located in a seismically active zone, and earthquakes have left their mark on the condition of the complex over the centuries. Guides often tell a beautiful legend that this gigantic mosque was a gift from Timur's wife to him. And the rush is explained by the fact that the structure had to be ready by the time the commander returned from another campaign. But historians agree that the complex was commissioned by Tamerlane himself. Masters from India, Persia, and Khwarezm worked on the construction. The iwans of the mosques, there are 3 in total, are decorated with mosaic compositions reminiscent of patterns found on oriental carpets. Bibi Kanim was perhaps the most challenging site to restore. The monument was considered almost lost. In these shots, you can see that large-scale restoration only began at the end of the 1970s. The full structural restoration of the complex was only completed by the year 2000, and the restoration of the interiors is still ongoing. The entrance to the main mosque is still closed, but you can peek inside through the wooden panjara. But where is Registan? An attentive viewer might ask. And here it is, the symbol of Samarkand, the famous square founded by Timur as a marketplace. It was only later that it became framed by 3 madrasas. The Ulugbek madrasa was the very first to be built in 1420 by order of the ruler Ulugbek himself, the grandson of Amir Timur and one of the most accomplished astronomers in the history of the science. The building, with its 2 minarets, was erected in just 3 years. Originally, it was designed for 5 hujras, cells, and 100 students. Ulugbek himself taught mathematics to the students. And this is a view of the Ulugbek madrasa in 1868. The madrasa has been well preserved. That's what happens when a scholar, not a warrior, is the builder. The patterns on the portal, the domes, and the minarets all are still in place. However, in 1931, they did have to save the right minaret from collapsing. The Sherdor madrasa, on the other hand, and the Tilyakori madrasa were built 2 centuries later. Of the 3 madrasas, for some reason it was Sherdor that was the favorite of the battle painter Vasily Vereshchagin. The artist painted several works featuring the mosaic portal and minarets of Sherdor, which stood like silent guardians and witnesses to the everyday life of Samarkand at that time. By looking at these paintings, by the way, even before the advent of color photographs, one can understand how well the building's decoration was preserved. But let's pause for a moment to talk about Vereshchagin. Personally, I am amazed by the realism with which the paintings are executed. This applies both to the subjects and to the artistic mastery in the rendering of details. All these paintings were created by Vasily Vereshchagin between 1871 and 1873, after his trip to Samarkand at the invitation of Governor General Kaufman, and are united in the Turkestan series, which consists of 13 paintings as well as sketches and drawings. The artist himself repeatedly took part in battles and witnessed the horrors of war, but his paintings were not characterized by the classic triumphant themes typical of battle painters. They are more like brush-painted photographs depicting the unpleasant backstage of battles, the everyday life of ordinary people, or even some detail that fascinated the artist, such as in the painting The Doors of Timur. Today, the paintings from the Turkestan series are housed in the Tretyakov Gallery in Moscow. And from Vereshchagin's painting Registan, we can once again understand what the Sherdor Madrasa looked like in the second half of the 19th century. The main highlight of the Sherdor Madrasa is considered to be this mosaic depiction of tigers on the portal. The explanation is as follows. The tiger is a student, chasing after knowledge represented by the antelope. In Vereshchagin's paintings, as well as in old photographs, it is clear that it was the upper part of the portal and its symbolic scene that time did not spare. It was only fully restored in the early 1950s. Guides love to tell the story of the medieval butcher Haji Muhammad Katonga, who, according to legend, fed the builders of the madrasa for free for many years. After his death, as a sign of gratitude and respect, he was buried right across from the madrasa. Completing the ensemble is the Tilakari Madrasa, with its spacious inner courtyard. The jewel of the complex is the mosque. Its dome has been completely restored, but the interior decoration has been preserved in its original form. In this photo from 1888, you can see the arabesques and ornamental painting. Modern restorers have managed to preserve and highlight the intended beauty with gilding and cobalt shades. It's fascinating to follow the development of Registan through old photographs, from a dusty trading square with ramshackle buildings and at times even a place of public executions, from a noisy arena where new meanings were proclaimed, to an aesthetic attraction for tourists from all over the world where you can come into contact with living history. A vivid illustration that we really do live in the best of times. That's all for now. I'll be waiting for you in the comments. Share your impressions of today's episode and of Samarkand, if you've been there. See you next time.